Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is The Consequences of My Bloodline by Ovaluz. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. Without sharing anything too personal, the paranormal experiences in my family do not start with me. My father has lived a lifetime of weird and unexplained events in which he believes stemmed from the strange practices of my grandmother, who gave a shot at witchcraft back in the late 70s and 80s. These experiences that were lived through by my father granted him great amounts of interest into the paranormal world, which led him into his current position of owning a ghost hunting team in our home state of Colorado. Some of his earliest and most memorable experiences were back when he was in grade school. Apparently his mother had been trying to learn some spells and or rituals of witchcraft in order to reach into the veil or talk to her spirits, something or other. These practices must have worked because they did not just affect my grandmother. In fact, they brought down a lot of havoc on my young father. My dad tells me that when he was about 6-ish, he once awoke in his bed to look up and see a balloon floating in his doorway. The balloon was not moving, and then suddenly it was. Ever so slowly, the balloon started to steadily float over to his bedside, right next to where his head was. After a moment, it sunk to the floor. Whatever it was that my grandmother brought in, it started toying with my father. I never heard what his reaction was to this, or what happened after. What I do remember is that when he told me that, it scared me so bad because it reminded me of the movie It. Unfortunately for my dad, he did not just see balloons in his room while he was in bed. When he was about 20 years old, he was enlisted in the United States Air Force. He lived in the dorm rooms on a base down in Tampa Bay, Florida, which is where he met my mother. The following event is amongst one of the most terrifying things that has ever happened to my father. One night in the dorms, my young parents were sound asleep, crammed up on a twin-sized bed in the corner of their room. My dad tells me that he half woke up and saw something on the edge of their bed. He opened his eyes a little wider to get a better view at whatever it was that he was seeing, and he saw some sort of figure partially slouched over the bed, watching them. He was able to make out some details, but he thought he was just seeing things, so he rubbed his eyes and sat up a little. But the figure was still there. He was not just seeing things. He says that whatever it was not a person. He says that it looked amphibious, like it was some sort of wet and alienish, almost gargoyle-looking creature. He was obviously frozen in fear, and he tried to blink a few times because he told himself that there was no way in hell that this was a real thing he was seeing. When the creature did not go away, my dad started to shake my mother awake in a frantic state of panic. He says that when my mother awoke and asked what the hell was going on, the creature was just gone, vanished. When I had first heard this story, My mother told me that she remembered this event crystal clear. She said my father was extremely jumpy, high alert, and paranoid for the next 2 weeks, constantly looking in the rearview mirror while driving, losing sleep, not going anywhere alone, etc. When I ask about it now, my dad tells me that he has absolutely zero idea what happened that night. He adds a bit more detail to the description of the creature, saying if this was in fact a person, then he was in some sort of ridiculously high-end costume, that it would have been equipped with professional cosmetic features and body paint, which in that setting is almost less believable than it being something inhuman. How could someone like that even get in, let alone vanish? There are plenty of more terrifying stories from my father that could be shared, but now is the time I will change the subject to myself. Just a little background. I was born and raised in Colorado, specifically in one of the many suburban homes outside of Denver. I have lived a very action-packed paranormal 20 years. I believe that my experiences are due to my lineage and some sort of energies that have been passed down from my father and grandmother. Probably one of my earliest experiences was when I was about 3. Sitting in the back of my mom's Jeep, I had a very strange conversation with her that not only scared her, but now scares me to even think about. Apparently my mother was driving us home one night, just her and I, and in the middle of the silent car ride, I asked my mother, where was I before this? Now, before you start to think this is not a creepy question, just wait for it to thicken a bit. My mom laughed and told me, well, you just weren't here yet. You were not born yet. She then had to listen to her toddler reply, no. Where was I before that? My mother just repeated herself a few times, saying that I was not anywhere yet, that I was not born yet, that there was nothing before this. My mom would tell you today that I was getting frustrated, that I could not get my question across in a way for her to understand. And I was only 3. How the hell would I even know how to ask something like that? I was supposedly getting so irritated that I was not able to ask or explain my question to her in a way to get the answer that I wanted. She said it was like I had knowledge of something, and that maybe I didn't quite understand it, that I needed her help in order to figure it out. Like whatever it was so normal to me that I figured my mom should definitely know what I was talking about. Creepy, if you ask me. As far as I know, nothing ever furthered from that night in regards to my question. But I will always be weirded out, knowing that that was a real conversation that I had with my mother all those years ago. Even I still remember bits and pieces of it on my own end. A more recent experience happened to me back in 2020. Have you ever heard of sleep paralysis? I'm sure you have. If you have never experienced an episode of sleep paralysis, I pray that you never have to go through it. Upon research, you will find that the most common ages for sleep paralysis are late teens and early 20s. I started to experience sleep paralysis when I was about 5. I have been experiencing sleep paralysis pretty frequently since that age, and I have grown so used to it that it does not really faze me anymore. If you do not know what sleep paralysis is, here's a very short lesson. When the human brain is in its deepest state of sleep, it is called rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep for short. In this state, the most vivid dreams occur, and your brain will paralyze your body. This is to ensure that you do not act out your dreams while you are sleeping. So, for example, if I was in deep sleep and having a dream about surfing, my body would not be jumping up and hanging loose in my bed. Sometimes, however, if you wake up in this cycle of sleep, there is a chance you can be fully conscious before your brain unparalyzes your body. And when this happens, you will be stuck in place, not able to move a muscle. Not only that, but because you were just in REM sleep, both visual and audible hallucinations are very common in this state. This can last anywhere from a few seconds to sometimes even a minute or more. Now, onto the story. I was in bed when I had woken up, unable to move. I knew I was in paralysis, and by this point, I was so grown to the feeling that I was not worried. I was just going to wait it out. I started to get freaked out when I hallucinated that I was in some sort of forest, like my entire room was just now in a gray, foggy forest. I was stuck there in my bed, and at the edge of the forest, I saw what looked like probably 3 or 4 all-black dogs. I could see them moving, pacing back and forth, as if there was some sort of force field preventing them from coming any closer to me. But I could tell that they wanted to. I then heard a loud, and I mean loud, deep and croaky voice start speaking in my mind. It was speaking in a language I did not understand. At this point, I am scared crapless, and I cannot wait to be out of here. It spoke angrily and impatiently, saying whatever the hell it was saying. The words, they started to turn into English after a bit. The only words I was able to make out were, "Right back to hell." I then saw that the force field or barrier or whatever it was faded away, and the dogs started making a dead sprint to me. I tried to scream. I could hear their paws hitting the leaves and their little whines as they desperately tried to race to me. I tried to thrash around. I tried to cry, but there was nothing. I was frozen, and there was nothing I could do. As the dogs got closer, I could see that they were blurry, like they were just jagged like shapes of dogs, and they were scribbled in black, like some spots of them were not fully colored in. They were like some very well shaded, underdeveloped drawings, like a messed up Polaroid picture. As soon as the dogs landed on me, they went to bite and scratch me. As soon as they made contact to me, I shot up in bed, in my actual bedroom, completely out of breath and sweating. Fear does not even come close to describing the feeling I felt that night. It goes without saying that I did not go back to sleep, and I was outright rattled from the experience. Since then, I have never had a sleep paralysis experience so bad. My dad tells me he used to get it real bad too,